My girlfriend took me to her high school reunion and introduced me as the guy I settled for. Everyone laughed, including me. But that laugh, the one I forced out of my throat, it died the second someone asked me what I do for work. I told them, and suddenly, the room went quiet. Even she looked at me differently, like I'd been upgraded in real time. That's when I realized I wasn't her partner. I was her placeholder. And this entire time, she'd been measuring me against a ghost from her past. The moment I found out what she said about me when I wasn't listening, that's when I finally walked away, for good. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I should have known the night was going to go sideways when I saw the name tag. It was a plain white sticker, cheap and curling at the corners, slapped across my chest like a label on a clearance item. Jess handed it to me with a smirk and said, "Just write your name and, I don't know, something cute about yourself." I paused, Sharpie in hand, looking at the sea of people around us in the reunion ballroom, each one with flashy little taglines under their names like CEO, pediatric surgeon, or mom of 4+ marathoner. Even the class clown from her year had written, "Still funny. Now rich." I scribbled just my name. Darren. Nothing else. Jess frowned at it, but didn't say anything. This was her night. 10 years since she graduated, and from the way she'd been obsessing over her outfit, her hair, and how many squats she could fit in before Friday, you'd think it was a red carpet premiere. I didn't mind. I loved that she cared about appearances, about impressions, about being remembered. What I didn't expect was how easily she forgot I was real, too. We made our way into the ballroom at the downtown hotel. Strings of fairy lights were draped along the walls. The DJ was already spinning early 2010s hits, and clusters of alumni clung together in semicircles, squealing and hugging and laughing at stories that had gathered dust. Jess walked in like she belonged there. And she did, polished, magnetic, glowing. She wore this emerald green dress that clung just right. Heads turned. I felt lucky. Then I stopped feeling lucky. We hadn't even made it halfway to the bar when she started introducing me. "Everyone, this is Darren," she said to a group of maybe 5 people. "The guy I settled for." They laughed. Hard. Like she'd just dropped the punchline to a roast. Her old friend, a brunette with those Botox cheeks that never really move, actually clapped. I chuckled too, reflexively, like an idiot. That weird, strained laugh you do when you're not quite sure if you're supposed to be in on the joke or the butt of it. "She's kidding," I muttered, smiling too widely. "Am I, though?" Jess said, nudging me with her elbow and winking. Everyone howled again. And right there, in that first 10 minutes, I felt the kind of humiliation that doesn't come with a big scene. It's slow. It's soft. It's a creeping realization that you're standing next to someone who doesn't see you the way you thought they did. I tried to brush it off. Told myself it was nerves, nostalgia, that weird high school energy in the air. People say dumb things at reunions. They drink, they regress. Maybe that's all this was. We made it to the bar. Jess ordered a cocktail I couldn't pronounce. I just asked for a whiskey neat. "You okay?" she asked me once we had our drinks. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, not in affection, more like calibration. Checking my temperature. Testing the waters. "All good," I said. But I wasn't. I kept hearing it on loop. The guy I settled for. I knew Jess had a type before me. Polished, Ivy League, dad's golf buddy kind of guys. She dated a consultant, a guy who ended up working on Capitol Hill, and some other finance bro who once tried to tell me Bitcoin was a vibe. She met me in a totally different season of her life. Post-divorce parents, post-pandemic burnout, post-trying to please everyone. She told me once that I made her feel safe. I took that as a compliment. But now, surrounded by the ghosts of who she used to be, maybe I just looked ordinary. A few more people joined our little circle. More hugs, more high-pitched squeals, more glances at my name tag with vague recognition before they returned their gaze to Jess. And then it happened. "So, Darren," said a tall guy in a tucked-in polo and that fake deep voice people use when they think they're important. "What do you do for work?" I didn't even hesitate. I'd said this 100 times before, always casually, never bragging. I own a portfolio of short-term rentals, vacation homes, mostly. A few out-of-state units I run remotely. Also have a logistics software company I built with a friend. Automates back-end operations for boutique hotels. Silence. No joke. Dead silence. The guy blinked. One of Jess's friends actually tilted her head like a confused dog. Jess looked up at me like she hadn't heard me say that before, which was wild, because she had, dozens of times. You own all that? Someone asked. Yeah, I said, sipping my drink. Keeps me busy, but I like it. Suddenly, the air shifted. Someone mumbled something about doing really well for yourself. A woman I hadn't even been introduced to leaned over and said, Wait, so you're like, successful? That's when Jess laughed again, but it was different this time. A half-second too late. Too tight. She wasn't amused. She was surprised. The guy in the polo, Jason or Jared or something equally forgettable, chuckled and said, Damn, Jess. Settled for might have been a bit premature, huh? I smiled politely, but my stomach turned. Jess cleared her throat. Well, I always said he was a hidden gem, she said, looping her arm around mine like we were suddenly team players. Hidden gem. Like I was some thrift store find she brought out for show and tell. The conversation drifted away from me after that, but the tone had changed. People were suddenly interested. Not in me, per se, but in what I represented. Money. Success. Possibility. Jess leaned in more. Laughed louder. She kept stealing glances at me, but not the kind you'd want from your partner. It was like she was recalibrating, rethinking. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest tighten. I hadn't changed, but their perception of me had, and so had hers. For a while, I stood there letting the small talk wash over me. Jess told someone I was low-key brilliant. I took another sip of whiskey, and I thought about all the ways people reveal themselves when they think they're around people who matter. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. I felt like I'd walked into a room expecting a warm night of nostalgia and ended up on stage at someone else's comedy show. Unaware, I was the punchline. And what hit me hardest was this. The only thing that changed the way they looked at me was the number of zeros in my income. Not my character. Not how I treated Jess. Not the nights I drove 2 hours to pick her up when her car died. Or the way I still remember how she likes her coffee on Sunday mornings. None of that made them blink. But money did. And Jess. She blinked too. We broke off from the group about 20 minutes later, partly because Jess wanted to make the rounds, and partly because I was starting to feel like a mascot, paraded around and pointed at like some unexpected win. She kept introducing me with a little more sparkle in her voice now, more curated phrasing. This is Darren. He runs his own tech company. Or this is my boyfriend. Super smart, really successful. Gone was the settled for bit. It was as if someone had gently reminded her I wasn't the underachiever in her love life she thought I was. But here's the thing about those moments. They stick. It didn't matter that she pivoted. It didn't matter that she wrapped her arm tighter around me or started dropping buzzwords like entrepreneur and self-made when she talked about me. The damage was done. I couldn't stop hearing the laughter. The way her eyes sparkled, not with pride, but with amusement, when she made that joke. It wasn't the joke itself. It was the ease of it. The comfort in saying it out loud, in front of everyone, like she'd rehearsed it. You don't say something like that offhand. You don't call someone the guy I settled for, unless that's the story you've been telling yourself for a while. It made me rethink everything. I kept watching her that night. Not in a possessive way, just quietly, as if trying to decode a new language. She was different around these people. Not just more polished, but more performative. Her laugh was higher-pitched, her posture more upright, her smile constant but shallow. She was curating herself, choosing the version of Jess that would best impress this particular audience. And that version? Apparently, it didn't include dating someone she could be proud of until she had proof of my financial worth. We found a table near the edge of the room, where the music was slightly less deafening and the lights dimmed just enough to blur out imperfections. She was chatting with someone she used to run track with, some guy with too much gel in his hair and a Rolex that screamed lease payment. I just sat there, sipping my drink, smiling when appropriate, nodding when needed. Then someone else joined our table. Jess? Holy crap. A tall guy in a navy suit walked over, sleeves rolled up, loosened tie, perfect 5 o'clock shadow. The kind of guy who looked like a rom-com lead in the third act. The one who shows up right before the wedding and says, "Don't marry him. You love me." "Trent," she gasped, standing up so fast her drink nearly spilled. "Oh my God, Trent." They hugged. Not the polite, tap on the back kind. This was long. Familiar. Her hands lingered on his shoulders. His lips brushed her cheek a little too slowly. I stood up, out of respect or maybe habit, but neither of them noticed me for a second. Finally, Jess turned. "Darren, this is Trent. We dated forever ago. Senior year and half of college," Trent added with a knowing smile. I extended my hand. "Nice to meet you." He shook it, firm and warm, like he knew exactly who he was. "So you're the lucky guy, huh?" he said. I smiled. "That's what I keep hearing." They laughed at that, shared a glance. The kind of glance that says we have history. And suddenly, I felt like a third wheel in my own relationship. Jess launched into catch-up mode. Where he lived, what he was doing now, how he just got back from consulting in Dubai. It was a rapid-fire exchange of remember when, stories and casual inside jokes. I tried to listen politely, but each anecdote chipped away at my patience. Not because of the stories themselves, but because of how she looked at him, like she was remembering something better. At one point, Jess excused herself to the bathroom. Trent and I were left at the table, silence hanging between us like a taut wire. "She's still something, huh?" he said, swirling the ice in his drink. "Yeah," I replied. "She is." He looked at me. Not cruelly, just curiously. "You two serious?" "Been together a little over a year," I said. He nodded. "She used to say she'd never settle. Had this whole checklist. You check it all off." I met his eyes. "I check off what matters." He chuckled. "Fair enough." Jess returned a minute later, cheeks flushed. She looked between us like she expected one of us to be dead or offended. When she saw we were still both upright and smiling, she relaxed. The night dragged on after that. We danced a little, her more than me. I watched her float through the crowd like a woman reborn, feeding off the attention, the memories, the validation. I wondered if I was just the placeholder she brought to make sure she didn't show up alone. A safe bet. A good story to tell when people asked if she ended up okay. Because here's the cruel truth no one likes to admit. Some people aren't looking for love. They're looking for proof that they made the right choices, that they're doing better than their exes, that their life still sparkles. And me? I wasn't sparkle. I was stable. When we got home that night, she kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch, buzzing from wine and nostalgia. "That was so fun," she said, her voice dreamy. "You were great tonight." "Thanks," I said, loosening my collar. She turned to me. "I hope you know I didn't mean it. What I said about settling. It was just a joke." I didn't reply right away. Just looked at her. Really looked. "Do you think you settled for me?" I asked. She paused. "Not long, but long enough." "No," she said. "I think I chose comfort over chaos." "Is that settling?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, heart pounding, wondering how many times she'd said that line in her head before saying it out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. She never said I was what she wanted. She just said I wasn't the mess she used to chase. And that's not love. That's resignation. I didn't bring it up the next morning. The whole settled for comment. The pause when I asked if she really meant it. I kept it all tucked in the back of my mind like a sharp object wrapped in a towel, still dangerous, but harder to see. Jess moved through the kitchen in one of my old t-shirts, hair piled in a messy bun, humming like nothing had happened. She handed me coffee like she always did, sweetened just the way I liked it, and I almost let myself believe we were fine. But that's the thing about people, we carry truths in our silences. And her silence last night had been deafening. "I think you made quite an impression," she said, glancing at me over her mug. "Oh yeah?" I asked, half smiling. "MHM. Everyone was asking about you. What you do, how we met, if you're real." She laughed lightly. "I told them you were." Mostly. Mostly, I echoed, sipping. Jess was always quick with a joke, but I couldn't help noticing how often the punchline involved me being less than. Less exciting. Less polished. Less expected. It didn't sit right. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, as we were cleaning up from brunch, her phone buzzed with a message from one of her old friends. Jess read it and laughed to herself. What's funny? I asked, drying a plate. Oh, nothing, she said. Just Ellie. She was like, girl, you didn't tell us Darren was loaded. We thought you were dating a teacher or something. I paused. Not at the insult. Though yeah, that stung too, but at the way she said it. Like it was a joke even to her. Like they were all in on some inside joke and I was the punchline again. I didn't realize being a teacher was funny now, I said, setting the plate down a little harder than necessary. Jess rolled her eyes. You know that's not what I meant. It's just, you don't act like someone with money. You're not flashy. You don't name drop. You don't even have social media. Sorry, I said dry. Next time I'll show up in a rented Lumbo and brag about my stocks. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. That afternoon stayed with me all week. And by Friday, I noticed something had shifted between us. Jess started asking more questions. Not curious questions. Calculating ones. So wait, she asked one night while scrolling Instagram. How many properties do you actually have? 17, I said, not looking up. Her eyes widened slightly. And you manage all that by yourself? Mostly. Got a small team. My buddy and I built a back-end system that automates most of the logistics. Cleaning, bookings, guest communication. She nodded slowly. I didn't know you were that successful. I looked at her. Why do you say it like that? She shrugged. You just don't seem like the type. What's the type? I asked. I don't know, she said. You don't wear Rolexes. You don't talk about the grind. You don't market yourself. I didn't say anything. Because the truth was, I didn't need to market myself. I was already where I wanted to be. I worked hard, quietly, while everyone else performed their hustle on social media like it was a talent show. But her reaction, it stung. Because behind her words was a truth she hadn't said out loud yet. I wasn't the man she thought she was bringing to that reunion. And now that she knew who I was, she didn't quite know what to do with me. The next night, we were at a dinner party hosted by one of her friends from work. Corporate types, flashy decor, overpriced wine. I mostly kept to myself, answering questions when asked, listening more than speaking. And then it happened again. So Darren, one of the husbands asked as we passed around a charcuterie board, what do you do? Jess jumped in before I could answer. He's in real estate and software. He basically runs 2 companies. I smiled politely. That's the short version. Wait, like, real estate? The wife asked, leaning in. Or like you own a condo somewhere? I own 17 properties across 4 states, I said, taking a sip of wine. Vacation rentals, mostly. I also co-founded a tech company that automates logistics for boutique hospitality operations. Dead silence again. Then, damn, someone muttered. Jess laughed too quickly. Yeah, I hit the jackpot, didn't I? Everyone chuckled. But my smile froze. It was the way she said it. Like I was some golden ticket she stumbled into. Not someone she chose. Not someone she respected before she found out the numbers. I watched her for the rest of the evening. How she adjusted her story, amped up her pride, claimed pieces of my success as if they reflected on her. We travel all the time, she said at one point. Well, he books all the flights and finds the best deals. He. Like I was a tool in her narrative now. The stable, successful boyfriend she didn't know she needed. The one who made her look good. That night, back at our place, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jess slept soundly beside me. It hit me then, like a slow-moving train I'd been trying to ignore. She hadn't introduced me as the guy I settled for because she thought it was funny. She did it because she believed it. Because, in her mind, love without flash was less, and I only became more in her eyes once others validated it. I turned to look at her, this woman I'd spent a year building a life with. And I didn't feel angry. I felt small. Like the version of me she really wanted only showed up after a price tag was attached. And that's when I realized, sometimes people don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with your resume. The next morning, Jess brought me coffee in bed again. That was her routine, a kind gesture that used to feel intimate, sweet. But that day, it felt like compensation. Thanks, I said, taking it from her. I waited for her to sit next to me like she usually did. She didn't. She hovered at the edge of the bed, hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleep shirt. I've been thinking, she said. That was never a good way to start a sentence. About what? She took a breath. About the reunion. And everything after. I think I owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. She sat down beside me, finally, and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in weeks. What I said about settling, it was out of line. I thought I was being funny, but I see now it made you feel small. And I hate that I did that. I studied her face. Jess wasn't good at admitting she was wrong. This took effort. It wasn't just the joke, I said quietly. It's how you looked at me when they found out what I do. Like I was worth more all of a sudden. Her lips pressed together. I didn't mean to. But you did. She didn't argue. For a long moment, we sat in silence. The kind that holds weight. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Of course. If I told you I was a teacher, would you still have brought me to that reunion? Jess hesitated. Not long. But long enough. I don't know, she said, barely above a whisper. I'd like to think yes. But I don't know. That landed like a brick in my chest. Honesty, I guess. But honesty isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just brutal. She looked at me, eyes wide with something between regret and fear. Darren, I'm not shallow. I just want to be proud of the person you're with. I finished for her. She nodded. And you weren't proud of me until other people were, I said. That silence came back again. She reached for my hand, but I didn't offer it. I like our life, she said. I like who you are. You're calm. You're thoughtful. You don't play games. I know I've dated flashy guys, but they never stayed. You did. But you didn't see me, I said. Not really. Not until someone else called me impressive. She blinked fast, like she was trying to keep the tears from falling. I didn't know if they were real or reactive. I'm trying, she said, to be better. I believed her. In that moment, I truly did. But trying doesn't erase the pattern. Trying doesn't unwrite a year of subtle digs and backhanded compliments. Trying doesn't unring the bell of being called settled for in a room full of strangers. And somewhere deep inside, I realized I wasn't just hurt. I was starting to feel resentful, like my worth had been evaluated, weighed, and only just now passed some invisible threshold. The worst part? I let it happen. I let her craft this narrative about me. I played along. I smiled through the jokes. I absorbed the subtle humiliation because I loved her. But love without respect is just a long goodbye you haven't said yet. That weekend, I went to visit my brother, Marcus. He lived 2 towns over, had a small house with a leaky roof and a garage filled with tools he never used. He was the opposite of Jess, grounded, unbothered by status. We sat on his porch drinking cheap beer, watching the sky shift from blue to gold. You look like hell, he said. Feel it too, I muttered. He waited. He always did. I told him everything. The reunion. The joke. The way Jess had looked at me afterward. The apology. The silence. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Let me ask you something, he said. If you lost it all tomorrow, your business, your rentals, everything, do you think she'd stay? That hit harder than I expected. I don't know, I admitted. Marcus nodded like that said everything he needed to hear. You don't want to build a life with someone who only loves you at your highest, he said. You want someone who stays when you're broke, pissed off, and ugly crying on the kitchen floor. I laughed bitterly. That's oddly specific. He grinned. It's also true. I went home that night with something heavy in my chest. Not anger. Not even heartbreak. Clarity. Because once you realize someone only sees you through the lens of what you can offer, it's damn near impossible to unsee it. I watched Jess that evening. How she curled up next to me on the couch. How she smiled like nothing had shifted. But everything had. For me, at least. I'd spent a year being the man she could love, stable, quiet, dependable. But now that she knew what I was worth, she loved me differently. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't love me at all. Just the resume I didn't want to show off. The first time I caught Jess smiling at her phone that week, I didn't think much of it. She was lounging on the couch in one of her oversized sweatshirts, legs tangled in a blanket, grinning at something on the screen. Her thumb was moving quickly. Tap, tap, pause, type. And she didn't look up when I walked into the room. I handed her the glass of wine she'd asked for and sat down beside her. She mumbled a thanks, eyes still glued to her phone. Something funny? I asked. She blinked and looked up, flustered. Oh, yeah. Trent sent me a picture of our senior prom. We looked so ridiculous. Trent. Of course. I gave her a small smile. I didn't realize you two were still in touch. She shrugged like it was nothing. He messaged me after the reunion. Just catching up. He's in town for a couple weeks. I nodded, took a sip of my drink, let it go. But something inside me tightened. Trent, her ex-boyfriend. The one who made her light up like a goddamn Christmas tree. The one who brushed her cheek with his lips like he still had a claim. The one who asked if I was the lucky guy, like I'd won a prize he'd misplaced. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But you don't smile like that at someone who's just a memory. Over the next few days, little things started adding up. She started dressing better for casual outings. I just feel like being cute, she'd say with a giggle. Her phone never left her side. She turned it face down on the counter when we cooked dinner together. She started wearing perfume to run errands. And I started paying attention. One night, I walked into the kitchen and caught her leaning against the counter, whispering into her phone. Her laugh was quiet and soft, like something secret. When she noticed me, she flinched, quickly ended the call, and turned toward the fridge like she needed something. Anything, to make the moment less suspicious. Everything okay? I asked. She grabbed a bottle of water. Yeah, just chatting with Ellie. I nodded slowly. Sounded like a guy's voice. She blinked. Trent. He called about something. It's not a big deal. But it was. It was the way her voice changed when she said his name. The slight lift at the end. The unspoken invitation for me not to question her further. I said nothing. I just walked out of the kitchen and sat in the dark of our living room, staring at the wall like it could offer me answers. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Jess missed something. She missed how Trent made her feel. Desired, admired, electric. She missed the version of herself she was when she was with him. And now, seeing me with new eyes, seeing me as valuable, no longer the man she settled for. She was recalibrating. Not because she wanted me more, but because she suddenly had options again. And Trent? He was the ultimate option. 2 days later, it all came to a head. We were at a rooftop event one of Jess's co-workers was hosting. Wine tasting, overpriced appetizers, a view of the skyline that everyone pretended to appreciate while checking their phones. I stood near the railing, sipping my drink, when I saw her. Jess. Across the terrace. Laughing. With him. Trent. She hadn't told me he'd be there. They were standing a little too close. Her hand was on his arm. He leaned in when he spoke, and she tilted her head in that flirty, familiar way that made my stomach flip. She hadn't noticed me yet, which was good, because I needed a second. I needed to breathe, to not walk over there and drag her into the truth. I approached slowly, calmly. My heart was pounding, but I refused to let it show. When she finally saw me, her smile faltered just slightly. Hey, babe, she said, looping her arm around mine. You remember Trent? I do, I said, extending my hand. Nice to see you again. He shook it, smug and smooth. Likewise. There was a pause, an awkward one. I let it sit. So, I said, looking at Jess. You didn't mention he'd be here. She glanced at Trent, then back at me. It was a last-minute thing. I nodded. Right. Trent cleared his throat. Well, I'll let you two catch up. He walked away with the same confidence I'd seen at the reunion. The kind that comes from knowing your presence leaves ripples. Jess turned to me. Don't make this a thing. Make what a thing? She rolled her eyes. Me talking to Trent. You're acting weird. I'm acting weird because you've been hiding things, I said quietly. You're texting him. Talking to him at night. Now he just happens to show up here, and I'm supposed to believe it's casual? It is casual, she snapped. We have history. That doesn't mean anything's happening. But you didn't tell me, I said. That does mean something. She crossed her arms, defensive now. I didn't think I needed permission to talk to an ex. It's not about permission, I said. It's about respect. Her eyes narrowed. So what? I'm not allowed to have male friends now. Friends don't make you hide your phone, I said. Friends don't make you giggle like a schoolgirl and lie about who you're on the phone with. That shut her up. She looked away, jaw tight, eyes scanning the rooftop like she was searching for an escape. I can't believe you're doing this here, she muttered. I can't believe you brought him here, I shot back. We stood in silence, the kind that buzzed with everything unsaid. Finally, she said, you're jealous. That's all this is. No, I said. I'm not jealous. I'm done pretending. She looked at me, confused. Scared. You made me feel small, I said. At that reunion, at your dinner parties, in your little jokes. And now that you realize I'm not who you thought I was, you're trying to decide if I'm worth keeping or if Trent's still an option. That's not true, she said. It is, I said. And I'm tired of waiting for you to admit it. Her face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just turned away and said, maybe we should talk about this later. No, I said. We've been talking around it long enough. She looked at me again, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Regret. Not for what she did, but for getting caught. We left the rooftop quietly. No dramatic exits. No screaming matches. Just a long elevator ride down in silence. The kind of silence where you start realizing the shape of the end. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't offer it. We didn't speak until we got home. She kicked off her heels by the door and walked straight to the kitchen. I watched from the hallway as she poured herself a glass of wine with trembling hands. That told me more than anything she could have said. When I finally stepped inside, she turned, eyes already bracing for impact. Are you done being dramatic? She asked, voice low. No, I said. I'm just getting started. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course you are. You lied to me, I said. You downplayed your conversations with him. You kept them secret, and you acted like I was paranoid for noticing. I didn't lie. Jess, I cut in. You told me you were talking to Ellie when it was him. That's a lie. She stared at the counter, jaw clenched. You don't even like red wine, I said, softer now. You only pour it when you're nervous. Her eyes flicked to mine. I didn't cheat on you. I never said you did, I replied. But you wanted to feel like you could. That's why you kept him close. You needed to know you still had it. That you could still turn heads, still be wanted by the one that got away. She opened her mouth, then closed it. You needed him to see what he missed out on, I continued. And when he didn't look at you the way he used to, you shifted gears. Suddenly, I looked a little shinier. That's not fair, she whispered. No, I said. It's not. But it's true. She sank into a chair at the island, wine glass held loosely between her fingers. I stayed standing. I needed the height. I needed to feel like I hadn't completely collapsed. I didn't plan any of this, she said finally. I didn't set out to reevaluate everything. It just happened. I know, I said. And that's the problem. She looked up at me, her face softer now. Sadder. I was proud of you, she said. After the reunion. After I really understood what you've built. But it made me realize how little I actually knew about your world. And how little you valued it before someone else did, I said. Tears pooled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't want to comfort her. Not this time. You were supposed to be the safe choice, she said, like the words hurt her as much as they burned me. The good guy. The one who wouldn't hurt me. And I haven't, I said. But you're hurting me anyway. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And for a moment, I felt my anger waver. Not because I forgave her, but because grief has a way of making everyone look a little more human. I sat across from her, leaned in slightly. I loved you, I said. And I think you love being loved. But that's not the same thing. She nodded, barely. I can't keep wondering if I'm enough for you, I said. Especially now that you know I'm not some nobody. You are enough, she said quickly. You're more than enough. Then why didn't you see it before they did? Silence. And there it was. I stood, took a breath, and said the words I didn't know I'd been holding all week. I need space. She looked up, eyes red. Are you breaking up with me? I'm choosing myself, I said. And I don't want to do it in a relationship where I have to earn your respect. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just cried. And somehow, that made it even harder. I packed a bag that night. Not all my things, just enough to put distance between us. When I reached the door, she followed. Darren, she said softly. I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. Does that change anything? No, I said. Because I don't think you do. I left before she could respond. The hallway was cold, the stairwell echoing with my steps. And for the first time in a long time, I felt both empty and free. Love doesn't always die in a scream. Sometimes it fades in a whisper of realization that the person holding your hand was never really looking at you. Just what you could give them. The first night away felt like breathing after being underwater too long. I checked into a short-term rental on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy, just quiet. Exposed brick, minimal furniture, a bed that still held the scent of hotel-grade detergent. I sat on the edge of it for a long time, holding my phone like it might detonate. Jess hadn't called. She hadn't texted. I kept checking anyway. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded, like both of us were waiting for the other to break first. By the second day, she finally did. 10:32 a.m. Jess. Can we talk? I stared at it for 20 minutes before replying. 10:54 a.m. Me. When? 10:56 a.m. Jess. Tonight. Come over. Please. And because I still cared. Even after everything, I did. When I stepped into our apartment that night, it felt unfamiliar. The air was too still. The lights too dim. Jess stood barefoot in the kitchen, stirring something in a pan that she clearly wasn't paying attention to. She looked up when she heard the door. I made dinner, she said, voice cautious. I didn't respond. Just toed off my shoes and walked in. She set 2 plates at the table. Pasta, wine, candlelight. Like a date. Like normal. But nothing was normal. We sat across from each other in silence. I pushed food around on my plate. She took small bites and didn't taste any of them. Finally, she spoke. You left so fast, I didn't get to explain. You explained plenty, I said. You just didn't realize you were doing it. She winced. I deserve that. I'm not here to punish you, Jess, I said. I'm here because I need clarity. Closure. Something. She nodded slowly. I understand. No, you don't, I said, sharper now. Because if you did, you wouldn't have invited Trent into our relationship, even emotionally, and pretended it was nothing. She looked up, defensive flickering in her eyes. I didn't invite him in. He just showed up. And you let him stay, I cut in. You welcomed him back. You gave him space that used to belong to me. Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said. Over and over again. And every time I brought it up, you acted like I was overreacting. Like I was being insecure or paranoid. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. I just wanted to feel like myself again. I paused. Explain, I said. Jess swallowed hard. When I saw everyone at the reunion, when Trent came back into the picture, I remembered who I was, before life got hard, before I had to make practical choices. And being around him made me feel seen. Not because I wanted him back, but because he reminded me of the version of me I used to like. And what was I? I asked quiet now. A mirror? A placeholder? No, she said firm. You were the safe space. The only thing that ever felt stable. But not exciting, I said. Not worthy of showing off until you found out what I was worth. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. That's the part you don't get, I continued. You didn't make me feel like your partner. You made me feel like a consolation prize. Her voice cracked. I was scared. Of what? Of messing up something good. Of picking wrong again. Of missing out on what could have been. There it was. The truth beneath everything. Trent represented the fantasy. I was the safety net. And in her mind, those two had never been in the same league, until I proved otherwise. You didn't pick wrong, I said. You just never stopped looking over your shoulder. Jess stood abruptly, pacing now, running her fingers through her hair. I know I've been unfair. I know I said things I shouldn't have, joked at your expense, downplayed your success. But I swear to God, Darren, I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. You didn't want to realize, I said. Because then you'd have to take accountability. She turned to face me. So what now? You leave for good? That's it. I looked at her. This woman I had built routines with, shared mornings and weekends and holidays. I saw her pain. I even believed it was real. But it wasn't enough. Jess, I said gently, I don't hate you. I don't even think you're a bad person. I just think we're not on the same page. We never were. I can change, she whispered. But I don't want to be someone who has to prove he's worth keeping, I said. Not anymore. She sat back down, trembling now. So you're choosing your pride over us? No, I said. I'm choosing my peace. She didn't follow me to the door this time. She just sat there, crying into her hands, as I grabbed my bag and walked out. And that time, I didn't look back. It had been 2 weeks since I walked out that night. 2 weeks of silence. No calls. No messages. No late night, I miss you texts or desperate voicemails. Jess had gone quiet, and honestly, I appreciated the space. I needed it. Because for the first time in over a year, I was starting to hear myself think again, without her voice in the background constantly trying to reshape my reality. I'd settled into the rental more than I thought I would. It was small, but it was mine, for now. I worked. I cooked for myself. I read. I thought. And I kept revisiting one question that I still couldn't answer. Was I wrong to leave? That doubt crept in when I least expected it. Brushing my teeth, folding laundry, driving to a showing. A voice whispering. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe people mess up. I knew those were dangerous thoughts. The kind that pull you back into cycles you've already outgrown. And then came the video. It was a Friday night. I'd just finished up with a property walkthrough when my phone buzzed. 8:46 p.m. Marcus. Bro, you need to see this. I didn't want to get involved, but I can't let this slide. Video attached. I hesitated before pressing play. My stomach dropped the second I saw the setting, the reunion ballroom, the familiar fairy lights, the crowd laughing. And then I heard her voice. Jess. It was her standing in a circle of classmates, drink in hand, mid-story. She was smiling, glowing. Really, the way people do when they're holding court. And she said it. I mean, come on. Darren is so not my type. Like, if you told 18-year-old me that I'd end up with a guy who drives a Toyota and wears Costco jeans, I'd have spit out my wine. But hey, stability over spark, right? Laughter erupted. She took another sip of her drink, then added with a smirk. He's not exciting, but he's stable. Like a golden retriever in human form. Someone off camera said, but he's cute though. She shrugged. He's fine. He's just not Trent. The laughter doubled. The video ended. I stared at the screen for a full minute, phone frozen in my hand. Not Trent. That was the part that gutted me. She didn't say it in a fight. She didn't say it during a breakup. She said it at a party. With a smile. In front of people. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. My heart didn't race. It didn't break. It just stopped feeling for a moment. Like the final piece of denial had been yanked away, and now there was only cold clarity. I texted Marcus. 8:49 p.m. me. Where did this come from? 8:50 p.m. Marcus. Ellie sent it to me. She's pissed too. Said she didn't think Jess would go that far. I tossed the phone on the couch and stared at the ceiling. So this was what she said when she thought I wasn't listening. When she thought no one would tell me. When the mask was off and the audience was hers. All that time I spent doubting myself. Questioning whether I was being too sensitive. Wondering if I should have fought harder. And meanwhile, she was out there dragging me behind my back. Reducing me to a punchline in a room full of strangers. Undercutting our relationship like it was a joke she'd grown tired of telling. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out the last box of my things I hadn't unpacked yet. Because that was the moment I stopped wondering if I'd made the right decision. I knew I had. Still, I had one last thing to do. Not for her. For me. That Sunday, I asked Jess to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between her place and mine. Neutral ground. I told her I had something I wanted to return. She showed up 10 minutes late, dressed casually, eyes scanning me like she wasn't sure which version of me she was going to find. Angry, cold, forgiving. I gave her nothing. Just a nod. We sat. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to rehash anything, I said. I just want to leave with everything clear. She nodded slowly. Okay. I pulled out my phone, queued up the video, and hit play. She froze. Her eyes locked on the screen. Her mouth dropped slightly. And when it ended, she said nothing. Just stared at her empty cup like it held answers. I didn't know anyone recorded that, she finally said. I figured. Her voice cracked. It was a joke. No, I said. It was the truth. Dressed up in punchlines so you didn't have to own it. Darren, you said I'm not Trent. You're right. I'm not. And thank God for that. Her face twisted. That's not how I meant it. Then how did you mean it? I asked. Explain to me how calling me a golden retriever and saying you settled isn't exactly what it sounds like. She had no answer. I gave everything I had to this relationship, I said. Every part of me. I was patient, supportive, proud of you even when you weren't proud of me. And still, that wasn't enough. Tears streamed down her cheeks now, silently. I didn't know you hated so much of me, I added. Not until you laughed about it. I don't hate you, she whispered. I hate myself. I nodded. That makes two of us. She reached across the table, but I stood before she could touch me. You made your choice. I'm just the one finally honoring it. I dropped her spare key on the table and walked out. This time for good. It's strange how quiet things get after a storm. No more arguments. No more forced smiles. No more wondering if she's texting someone else when she turns her phone screen down. The absence is deafening at first. You start reaching for patterns you'd grown used to: good morning texts, weekend brunch plans, the echo of someone moving around the apartment. But then the silence becomes something else. Peace. The kind that doesn't feel fragile. 3 weeks had passed since I walked out of that coffee shop. I hadn't heard from Jess since. No texts. No emails. No random, "Hey," just to see if I'd pick up. At first, I kept expecting it. Waiting for the apology, the long paragraph of half-meant regrets and what-ifs. But it never came. And over time, I realized that silence was the apology. It was her way of acknowledging that there was nothing left to salvage. I spent those weeks focusing on the things I'd let slip. I called my mom more. Got drinks with Marcus. Went back to the gym. Even took a trip to Denver alone. Something I'd been wanting to do for over a year, but never had time for because Jess didn't love cold weather or hiking or anything that didn't have a wine list. I hiked a trail just outside Boulder one morning. It was misty and quiet, the air sharp and clean. I stood at the edge of a rocky ledge, looking out at the world below me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. There was no audience, no performance, just me. I took a deep breath and let it all go. Every moment I'd shrunk myself to make someone else feel big. Every time I'd laughed off a comment that made my chest tighten. Every single second I'd spent trying to prove that I was worthy of the bare minimum. And somewhere in that silence, it hit me. I was never the consolation prize. I was the damn answer. Jess didn't break me. She revealed me. She showed me exactly what I'd been tolerating, exactly how low I'd set the bar for what I thought love should feel like. Not anymore. A few days after I got back from Denver, I ran into one of Jess's old friends, Ellie, the one who sent Marcus that video. She spotted me at a bookstore downtown, of all places, flipping through a copy of The Psychology of Self-Respect like life hadn't just handed me a personal case study in it. "Darren," she said, cautious. I looked up and smiled. "Hey." She shifted awkwardly. I wasn't sure if I should say hi. "It's okay," I said. "You're not the enemy." She laughed nervously. "Jess doesn't know I sent that video." "She probably suspects," I said. "But thank you. Really." She looked around and lowered her voice. "I just felt sick watching it. The way she talked about you. It wasn't fair." I nodded. "No, it wasn't. But I needed to see it. That clip saved me from staying somewhere I didn't belong." Ellie hesitated before saying, "You were always too good for her. We all saw it. I just wish she had too." "Maybe she did," I said. But by the time she realized it, she'd already burned the bridge. She nodded, gave me a soft smile, and we went our separate ways. Later that night, I got one final message. 9:12 p.m. Jess. I've started therapy. Not because I think it'll fix everything, but because I finally want to understand why I keep breaking the people who love me. I'm not reaching out to win you back. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry I didn't see you until it was too late. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I knew I wouldn't. That message wasn't for me. It was for her. And I hoped she meant every word. But her growth didn't require my presence. I deleted the message. Not out of anger. Not out of pettiness. Out of peace. Because walking away wasn't the hard part. Staying gone was. And I'd finally become the kind of man who could do both. Have you ever been someone's backup plan? The one they chose not out of love, but out of convenience? If this story hit close to home, tell me your experience in the comments. Whether you walked away or stayed too long, your story matters. And remember, being someone's safe choice isn't the same as being their right one. Let's talk about the power of walking away when respect is no longer on the table.